Okay, we are live. You know, it's really hard to wait those last 2 minutes for some reason. I just want to hit play and go. And I know a lot of you are already here waiting. And so here I am, and here you are, and we're ready for our week 4 recap. And I'm feeling a little relaxed today. My daughter just was doing work experience. She's in grade 10. And so she was doing work experience this week at the library and the art gallery. And so we picked her up for lunch in between the two spots. And so we had a nice relaxing lunch. My husband's home today. It's a beautiful sunny day. In fact, I'm realizing I need to get an air conditioner for my studio. The only problem is that when I'm filming for a course, I can't have I need to minimize as much background noise as possible. And so I have to close all the windows, turn off any fans, air conditioners, etc., and just keep it as quiet as possible. And it gets really warm. And so I'll film for as long as I can, and then I'll get really hot and start dripping sweat, and then I need to take a break. So it's a good thing I don't live in a hotter climate. Around here, it's 30 degrees is really as hot as it gets. That's Celsius. I think that's about 80 Fahrenheit. And so we think a 20-degree day is a nice warm day. That's about 70 degrees. So quite enjoying some springtime weather and the leaves popping out on the trees. Welcome to everyone joining me right now. I know Dee commented she's here past her bedtime, and I know it isn't a convenient time for those of you on the other side of the pond in Europe or way over in Australia. I'm not even sure. I think it's early morning for all y'alls. So I appreciate those of you who are willing to carve out time out of your day to be here live. And for those of you who are joining me for the rebroadcast, for the recording, thank you for making time to go through the recap. I really like taking time during our recap to kind of recenter in this process of learning watercolor techniques and mindset stuff. There's just a lot of information flying at you. You're getting feedback on your projects and paintings. And so we want to kind of pause and breathe and redirect and have a cookie. I have brought cookies. These little buttercream Italian cookies, they're called pasticcini, and my local grocery store brings them, and I have to really hunt for them on the shelves, and then I sneak them out to the studio so nobody knows I have them, and I get them all to myself. I'm supposed to be on a diet where I'm not eating sugar and all that, but that's no fun at all. And so here I am in my studio sneaking cookies. You know my secrets. Okay. Thank you, Robin, for being here to moderate. She's going to keep y'all under control and follow your questions. So when I'm teaching, it's really distracting to be trying to read the chat and make sure everything's working the way it should. So Robin is here to kind of keep an eye on things. She can give you technical advice if you're stuck on something, if you're having trouble with the video. And if you ask a question as I'm talking or demonstrating, she will make a note of it, and then we can bring it up at the end of the broadcast. She'll pop them up for me to read and answer. So I think everything's in order. So this week's focus was talking about subject matter. And as I looked over the content from the lessons, I realized it's not just about subject matter, because any subject matter can really be effective depending on how it's composed. So we're talking about subject matter in composition, and thinking about how those come together, and how to make our paintings more compelling requires knowledge of how to make an appealing and a riveting composition, how to guide your viewer through the painting. And there's a little bit of I often talk about guiding the viewer through the painting, and yet at the same time it's concerning to me that we are not overly focused on who that viewer might be and what their opinion might be of your painting. We want to think about how the eye travels through the painting. So maybe we should be thinking of like a disembodied eye. It makes me think of the Eye of Sauron, and we're not Lord of the Rings, we're not hobbits. But we want to recognize that there's a path that the viewer will follow, that our eye will follow, and we're a little bit biased because we know the painting, we know what our intention was, and so sometimes our brain will say, okay, this is where the eye goes first. And the reality of it is, if you walk into the room after some time away, It might be very different what you look at first and where your eye moves following the patterns of light and dark and the contrasts in the scene. So we kind of have to detach from our feelings about what we want to happen in the painting and think about what it actually is happening as we look at the painting. Where does our eye go? Does our eye bounce back and forth between objects that are competing or busy? We need to prioritize and have a hierarchy of where we want the viewer to go. And as we paint the same subject repeatedly, we get to know the subject on a personal level, and we get to know what works and what doesn't, and that helps us make better decisions on how we're going to arrange everything and the sizes they're going to be and the level of contrast we're going to do. As we paint the same subject repeatedly, a couple things. We know it's important to choose a subject we're engaged with, something we feel good about. And I know a number of you in the community have commented that, you started with a painting and then you're like, this isn't really doing it for me. That's totally okay. Pick something else. It's a good idea to recognize that there might be weaknesses in our initial impression of what might make a good painting, that as we paint it, we're like, there's not a way I can develop this, at least not in this stage of what I'm interested in and where my skill level is, that is going to work well for this painting. I'm going to move on and take this knowledge elsewhere, take my business elsewhere. So I find that that I really want to paint something that I love and am interested in, a scene that strikes me, and that's that personal chord. And as I'm painting it repeatedly, more than once, I get to really ask myself, what do I want to say in this painting? And another thing I've noticed, and we'll talk about, I don't think I have a visual example for you, but I find that I often get stuck and repetitive doing the same thing repeatedly, painting the scene frequently without making significant changes. And that's okay too. I find that there are times when I need to get frustrated or bored with a subject I need to get frustrated or bored with the subject. See, I keep looking over at the chat. I'm going to minimize it right now. Robin, text me if you need me so that I can just focus on staring at my face on the screen and making sure that at least the video is visible. Okay, so when I get stuck, when I'm painting the same thing over and over again and nothing seems to be changing significantly, there's like minor changes, but it's just the same painting over and over again. Sometimes that level of frustration is what propels me to throw the baby out with the bathwater and try something completely different. Sometimes we need to be repetitive in order to break the mold and say, oh, this is what I don't want, or this is my rebellion against that. And that's happened for me a number of times, and it's really exciting when it does. As you're posting work in the community, this is another thing I'm concerned about. As we talk about the viewer, we want to detach from thinking about the viewer as a specific person, someone whose opinion that matters to us. You're here in Angela Fair's Watercolor Mastery course, and so it's very tempting, I think, for you to want to win my approval with your work. First of all, I'm just so glad you're here and taking the course and painting. I'm proud of every one of you, and it sounds cliche. And now I realize all the times when I thought other teachers were saying those things and sounding cliche, they maybe really weren't, because it's true. I get to see the hand of the artist in your work, and that is what I want to see. That is what pleases me. It's not your style. It's not the colors you chose. It's the fact that when you are painting from your heart, from an authentic place, I get to see you in your work. It's when you are painting and feeling stuck and those brushstrokes are coming out of frustration, you're still brave enough to post that and talk about and share your journey with us and give us the opportunity to encourage you and maybe see something in your work that helps redeem it and make it feel like it was valuable. This is really important to me. If you're painting to please someone else, an outside opinion, it's going to limit how well you're able to paint to please yourself. You're going to be putting other people first, and we don't want that. And it also leads to having paintings that are, when you're painting to please someone else, you don't know that other person on a deep personal level. We can't ever know somebody inside and out. So how can we truly paint to connect with them? We're going to paint what we think they want to see. It's like saying what you think somebody wants to hear and not really what you actually think at all. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to be just another cliche. We don't want paintings that are competent and but lifeless. And the last thing I want to see is all my students painting step by step, just like me, competent paintings that don't have you in them. They might look a lot like Angela Fair, and and you don't want it that. You don't need to be me because you have a beautiful artist inside of you. The artists we remember and the ones who stand out because they are different. They stand out. We remember them because they broke the mold and went against what everybody else was doing. Your unique vision is the one thing that you can bring to your art that nobody else can. We all use the same techniques, but you get complete freedom in how you use them and the decisions you make, and we should never be ashamed if our paintings are standing out from the rest of the group. The most creative people I know will go to these different creative events, scrapbooking parties or the painting parties, and they'll paint something that looks completely different from everyone else. And it might be completely different because it's really raw and messy, and everyone else is doing stuff that looks just like the instructor. Those are the more powerful and more creative and more authentic works. It's just the truth. Okay, so I'm going to share some student work in just a moment. I have a prize to give away this week as well to one of the students who is most active in the group this week. I usually pick from like the top 20 active users, just so you know how that's done. One name at random. And then we'll be talking about week 5 and the competency ladder. So hang on, we got lots to do. And I really want to make time for us to do some painting today. I'm hoping you'll be willing to look over my shoulder because I'm working on this brand new heart-led landscape course. And in the course, I will be exploring some different techniques, and I wanted to film one of those demos today, and I thought just for fun, I'd let you kind of join in and watch along with me, if I can get all the technology to work. Okay, so just before we move to looking at some student work and talking about composition, I want to just reiterate, I'm just reiterating, I'm just reframing what I already said actually, so let's skip that. Looking at my notes, these notes are available for download in the community after the broadcast, so I'll throw them up there once we wrap up here. Okay, let's just give me a moment while I switch everything over so we can take a look at some student work this week. And I'm only sharing a little bit because I do want to make room and time for painting. There we go, Dropbox, there you are for me. Okay, so again, I want to, Dropbox, thank you. I just want to talk about composition and how it influences our paintings. This is Sonali's painting, and there's a lovely balance here. Do you see the rhythm and harmony in this scene? I don't think this painting could feel, what would be the word? The opposite of peaceful. Could feel tense and warlike, I guess, and off-putting because there's so much balance happening. The sky is echoed in the water, and the branches have counterparts in the bushes down below, and we've got this little band of dark color that echoes the dark color bisecting the middle of the painting. Really harmonious. Sonali, as you're working on paintings like this, you might start to feel like, oh, maybe it's too harmonious. And that's where you want to look for kind of creating that hierarchy where there's something that stands out as a strong kind of focal point kind of element. I don't know if focal point's the right word, but just something to put in there that's kind of breaks up the pattern. But as if you're looking for a harmonious, peaceful feel, this color choice and the composition work really well to do that. Okay, I have to click to be able to see the names. Okay, Terry. Terry was showing this painting and reference photo, and I really liked, one thing you commented, Terry, is that you weren't sure about, I had commented about something about choosing a simple landscape option, without a ton of elements, and you were commenting that, you know, in Colorado you just have everything. You have rocks and lakes and skies and mountains and trees, so you know you want to put them all in a painting. That is totally cool. That is a great thing to do. What you need to do when you have a scene with a lot of elements like that is look for that one focal point. Figure out a way to tie all of those elements together to guide the eye through the scene. So in this case, looking at your left and right hand paintings, we have kind of two different focal points happening in those scenes. There's a lot of detail in the rocks on the right, and that kind of anchors our eye down to the lower part of the painting. And then on the left, the rocks are much paler and not a lot of contrast there, and so our eye is freer to move in towards the mountains. And in fact, you could probably push the colors and make them brighter along the water and the mountains in that version to see how that influences the way the viewer experiences the painting, where your eyes move to as you go over, as you inspect the painting. Inspect is the wrong word, but our eyes do read a painting. Unlike reading from left to right, we read usually from most dominant, to least, and then back again, hopefully, if there's a path for the eye to follow. That's the goal we want to have. This is Christina's. This is a really good example of a simple landscape, and it's absolutely beautiful. We have some very soft neutrals, and even in those soft areas, there's a lovely contrast. If you look in the sky, I think that dark cloud is so compelling, and the white cloud that's kind of coming up over the hill is a beautiful contrast to that. It kind of breaks up that cloudy, dark, brooding feeling with that feeling of light coming over the hill. The shape of the water, I think that's a lake or something. It reads as water to me, so that's what I'm going to call it. The shape of the water is very flat and looks almost pasted on in a way, just by the way it's shaped and just where it kind of curves at the very end, I think, on the left there. And but it works really well with this type of composition. Even though it doesn't feel like the deep water, we're not going for a realistic look here. It tells us what we want to know. And it creates this strong graphic quality that balances the painting really well. And the colors here are just marvelous. This is Diane's, another amazing loose landscape. Again, very simple, but look at how dramatic, that iconic, very clear that the focal point is that amazing cloud, and just beautifully done. Diane, you commented that you were worried about the trees being too dark. But I don't think you need to worry. It works in this painting. Everything kind of works together really well, and so then we don't obsess about like the little details. Hannah, I wanted to share this one as well because I thought when I saw it by itself, you'd shared it as a group of the different things you'd been working on, and it didn't stand out there, but when I saw it by itself, I saw some beautiful colors in the underpainting, and then you layered over that with your tree shapes, the beautiful lines there. The only suggestion I would have here is that you actually crop right to cut into, probably right along here, and I think you can see my mouse, my pointer, right along the left side of the trees. I would crop right so those little twiggy branches look like they are going outside of the page, and that would help balance the scene, I think, just a little bit more, and bring your eye back into the middle towards those beautiful colors. This is Heather's, another compositional kind of impactful painting. We have here a triangular composition. The eye moves around the painting, following the shapes of the flowers, and it's not a perfect triangle, that would be boring, but it's just slightly clustered too closer together. They're not all equal distances apart, and then that one down in the corner. The two up above bring your eye back to that part of the painting, and there's little bits of yellow here and there to kind of dance your face. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. To dance your eye around the page. Wow, that was great. Kimberly, I wanted to share yours because you had some questions about it, and I thought it was a really good one to share when we're talking about composition. First, you shared actually, I saw the painting first, so we'll look at that. So you shared your painting here, and there's some beautiful elements. It's really, really calm feeling. we've got two amazing, or actually three strong, amazing shapes in the lower 2/3 of the painting, and then the strong form of the mountain coming up. Because you have so many strong shapes, and it's hard to know what I should be looking at. I follow that zigzag pointer of the river up to the mountain, but then my eye keeps getting pulled back down towards the very strong, crisp shapes of the land. And so there's kind of this fight for dominance in the scene, and I think that's kind of what you were feeling. And we can kind of see that in your notan. Because the scene is bisected, it's cut in half by those trees that go across the middle. It's almost like it's two separate paintings here. I'm gesturing with my hands like you can see me. And so figuring out how to paint that means we have to establish some kind of pattern of that brings us to one particular area. And so tweaking on this notan would have helped you to be more intentional about how the eye follows the scene, looking for an overall pattern that establishes a strong focal point and creates that pleasing pattern between light and dark. Right now it looks like a lot of separate pieces. I like the one other artist's suggestion of maybe cropping the scene, and you could crop it a number of ways to bring the focal point, let one of those focal point areas win. So give it a try and see what you find out. That's the notes. They will be available for download after. Oh, Nancy, here we go. I think this might be the last one. I wanted to share Nancy's because there are minimal changes between these two scenes, and yet they give a very different feel. One of these sketches feels like a cooler day, and one feels like a hotter day by Nancy's choice of color. And I thought that was really neat to see. It's a minor change, but it makes a big difference. I definitely feel like the one with more blue down in the lower right has a little bit of a cooler feel, and the upper one has actually more light values, a little more white in the landscape on the ground, and I think that helps us. And then the warmer colored shadows, they're a dark green, help give that feel of a warm hot summer day. Can't speak. And yeah, that's everybody. So I wish I could share everyone's work. I enjoyed seeing all of your work this week, and just the way you're digging into the course content and really getting to know your own inner artist. Okay, let's see here. Notes. Okay, I'm going to go back to those notes that I skipped. I know you're just itching to hear what I had to say. I had a student in the community, Larissa, asking about my opinion on several of the paintings she'd posted, which one I thought maybe would be good for framing, if any of them, or several or whatever. And so let me see here. Oh, Kimberly has a question. Kimberly says, did you get a chance to see the updated version? I think that was the one where you cropped some of the mountain out, and so it was more focused on the lower half of the painting, and I did actually really like that variation. So yeah, I thought that was a good solution. I wasn't sure if you were fully committed to it or not at the time. Okay, so Larissa had asked me about what if I thought any of the paintings she'd posted, which ones would be, maybe appropriate for her to share or to frame. And so I had a response to her that I thought I would want to share with all of you. I said, first of all, Larissa, I love the energy and inspiration that's going into your work. I'm going to comment on a few, but I don't want you to think, and I don't ever want any of you to think, that I'm only picking the best from the bunch to comment on. The fact of the matter is, again, I'm going to say it again, you are the one who needs to evaluate what you want to put out into the world. When a painting resonates with you, and this is for me in the studio, this is my criteria for whether or not I share a piece of art. If something resonates with me, then I, especially after some time has gone on, because sometimes I'll have a painting, I'll be in that thick of painting honeymoon, I don't know, and I'll be like, this is the best thing I've ever painted, and I'll come back in a day or two and I'll be like, or a week or two, and I'll be like, it's just kind of, yeah, I guess that wasn't as great as I thought it was. And so I wait a little bit, I get to know the painting, and then if it's still resonating with me, then I share it. And when I present it to others, social media or in a gallery or just to my family and friends, if they resonate with it, that's kind of that initial, that's kind of some validation. It helps me to have that outside opinion, especially if it's people I really respect. So I do look for, does it resonate with others? And when I curate my own work, when I choose only to share the pieces that really ring that bell for me, it's really wonderful validation and confirmation when someone else feels that same way about it. And so we look for that, and we need to recognize that we are the best people to judge our own work. We do want to seek growth. We want to develop a good eye for what is good art, because what I thought was really good art back when I was 17, I don't have the same criteria today. But I also have always continued to look inward, to recognize that the work, to see if the work that I'm creating has that heart connection with me, the artist. And that brings authenticity and a ring of truth to what I'm creating. Okay, so yes. Okay, so we're going to do some painting, but just before we do that, I'm pretty sure I've talked about the competency ladder with you, but I just want to go there one more time. You're all in various stages of your creative journey. When we teach watercolor mastery, I recognize that the road to mastery, we're all in different places there, and that is okay. That's a good thing. We don't have to all be at the same place, and it's not a race where we're competing with each other. I've found, however, as I've observed, and this was from Effie McDermott, she was a former watercolor mastery student. She joined us a season or two ago, and Effie found this online and shared it with me, and I thought it was so great. I like to share it. The competency ladder. This is the general stages that we find ourselves in when we're looking to master a new skill, like watercolor. The first stage is the honeymoon stage. It's unconscious incompetence. It's when we're just getting started, and you get really excited about those accidental successes, the beginner's luck. That feels really good. You're like, oh, I can actually learn to paint. I have something, and you get excited about doing it. And then the second stage, after you've kind of fallen in love with the medium, for example, you fall into realizing that you have a long way to go. That's when you start to try to reproduce some of those happy accidents that started early on, and they don't happen so easily when you're trying to do them intentionally. In fact, it can often feel like we're backsliding because things that we did accidentally before we can't do intentionally now. That's the conscious incompetence stage. You recognize that you don't know that as much as you thought, and it's a really long stage to go through. It's a big learning stage, and a lot of people give up in that stage. It's hard. It's overcoming that mindset that says, wow, I suck. I'm not good at this after all, and maybe I should just quit while I'm ahead. The good news is that stage does not last forever. It's followed by conscious competence, and that's where many of you are starting to find yourself. You're building skill in watercolor, and you want to be more intentional about making style decisions, expressing who you are. And I do believe that while loose watercolor and intuitive watercolor can be painted by anyone at any stage of the watercolor journey, it's so much easier to make those stylistic, heart-led decisions when you have a foundation, a toolkit of watercolor techniques that you can use intentionally in your paintings. And so be patient with yourself as you work to master technique. If you don't have room in your brain for thinking about your style, that is okay. The room will come as you start to own those techniques. And then, of course, we get to unconscious competence, and that's kind of where I'm at, which I love being able to say. And I hate feeling like I'm taking credit for something because it's really just being too stubborn to quit. But lately when I make a painting, sometimes I get to think, I'm actually pretty good at this. And that's a really fun feeling to have. And I want that for all of you. So don't give up. Be stubborn like me. Be too stubborn to quit and just paint because you love it. Okay. Getting to this stage of unconscious competence is also what's leading us into our week 5 content matter. Oh, Marilyn, that's a great question. We'll get to that. Being playful with subject matter is something that I do because I don't want to get stuck in a rut, because I don't want my paintings to be predictable, because I feel like creativity has to kind of be tricked into emerging sometimes. And so as I've learned all these techniques, I can use them very competently, but finding that way to really connect is a process that generally involves kind of having to trick yourself into it. Be playful and creative. And playfulness is a really big part of what has made some of my best and most favorite paintings come to life. This one beside my head, yeah, right there, that one, was so exciting to create, and I felt like I was breaking rules, and it was so exciting that my heart was actually racing and I was short of breath, and I felt like I'd maybe just had too much coffee. And it was so exciting. I've never felt like that again, even though I've painted some really exciting paintings. Usually I'm able to keep my heart rate under control. But that letting go, saying, to heck with it, I'm going to break some rules and have a little fun. And I know this is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyhow. A very, very freeing. And that feeling of freedom, you get to own it and you get to take it with you into future paintings. Even if you only break that rule one time and then you go back to safety, you'll never want to let go of that feeling of freedom ever again. Okay. So being playful with technique for me has really helped me to develop my own personal style. Playfulness, creativity, we are the most ourselves when we are, when all our guards are down, when all our shields are down, we get back to that childlike creativity. Just think about the times when you are with the people you love the most in the world, people that know you and you feel safe with, and you're having a really good time. We want to get to that in our studio place, in our studio practice, and so we need to look for that playfulness and give ourselves permission to just be fun and silly. So we are talking about, yeah, okay. So, and I'm getting a bunch of questions. I want to answer those, and then we're going to switch over to my work surface and do some painting. This week's winner for our community, engaging in our community, is Holly Mitchell. The lovely Holly, you have won a $50 gift certificate for Blick Art Materials. Congratulations. Email me and give me your address and email address, and I can get that gift. It's an online gift card thingy, so I can get that out to you right away. Christine has answered one of my questions already. DSL Art asked, the paintings behind me, how are they framed and protected? And all three of those are mounted on a wooden panel and waxed to preserve and protect with the beeswax resin compound. There is a video for that on YouTube. Okay, so yeah. Jan commented, you're looking for clearer directions when choosing a reference photo for an assignment. I completely missed the info about choosing a simple landscape. I do try to include that on both my emails and in the course resources. So yeah, I apologize for that, Jan. I really recommend, for the most of the time, when you really want to loosen up, to work with something you're very familiar with. The more familiar you are with the subject, just the easier it is to let go and get a little loose with it. So I encourage you to do that. If landscapes aren't your thing and you're going into it going, I really don't know how to paint landscapes, probably you're not going to be loose and playful, are you? So really look for that thing that you're like, this is my safety zone. This is something I know really well. So I can throw some really crazy experimental stuff at it because I have this foundation of knowing this subject. Okay, Marilyn commented, I noticed in week 5 course material you work freely without the notan. Is it that you don't need it so much and you can do it in your head? In week 5, I broke some rules, exactly. I do not, and this is my confession, I do not always use notans. I do not always use value studies. Sometimes I just want to launch in and play. The problem with notans and value studies is that we can use them as a crutch. Well, I did the research, so now I can do this perfect painting. We don't want to go there. We have to just keep changing things up to really get motivated and excited about what we're doing. Birgit O'Connor, I was on her Instagram feed today and I was like so excited for her because she's talking about her new course. She's doing a floral and landscape course, and no, don't just rush over there and buy it, but she is a great teacher, so you can if you want to. But she's talking about this new course, and then she said, I have a portrait course coming up too. And I was so excited for her because Birgit is known, she made her reputation as a floral painter, and to see her breaking out and changing things up it has me so excited for what she's doing, and showing that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself ever. Even when you have a 20-30 year career in one medium and one subject, you can throw all that out if the muse takes you in a new direction. And I think that is just awesome. Okay, Robin's posting some questions here, so if you ask them during the broadcast, she's going to throw them up on the screen. Jan asked, should I paint the background first or last? I like to have an idea of what my background's going to be before I start painting. Sometimes it works better to add the background in last, but one thing I really struggle with seeing when I'm looking at the watercolor groups online is when a painter will post this beautifully detailed portrait, and they'll say, okay, now what color should I do the background? And everything else has been done to detail. Like they've put 8 hours into this painting and they never thought about what color they were going to paint the background. The background is not a separate thing from your painting. Sorry, I'm going into a rant here, Jan. You didn't know what you were getting into. The background is not a separate thing from your painting. Everything in your painting should support the focal point. So I like to have an idea of what my background is going to be, even if it is the kind of background where it needs to come in later, and I want to work out from the focal point, because I do that. I will start with generally I do two different things. I'll start with an underpainting that kind of establishes all the shapes, and that gives you your background. And everything gets, done at least painted in a pale color in that first layer. Or I will paint from my focal point and move out and add color, outwards from the focal point. And in that case, the background gets painted as well. It's just kind of separate, or it's not separate. It's just supporting the focal point, and the focal point happens first. Both times I'm thinking about my background and the colors I'm going to use and how they support the painting. We want to have that all planned out and intentional. Christine asks, what are my thoughts when I'm working with a subject I like, but the reference photo is not great? That's a good question. When I was coming home today and looking at the fresh leaves on the trees, I was not taking any pictures because my windshield was dirty. My husband was driving, so I could have been taking pictures, and I didn't want to ask him to stop. So I was looking, how would I paint this if I could just paint it from what I remember? So if I had a terrible reference photo because it was my memory, what would I do? And so I was thinking about generalities, that feeling of the quality of the light. So what are the overall patterns of color and light that I'm looking at right now? I can't remember all the details, so I have to look for patterns and shape relationships and patterns of light and contrast, if that makes sense, and approximate colors. So I look for that kind of thing. And then we have to also, if the reference photo is not great, often we have to simplify, and it can really force us to simplify. Also a good thing. The deal with simplifying, and DSL Art, you commented something about being afraid to get too loose. You don't have to worry about that. If you're oversimplifying your subject to excess, the good news is you have something you can build on. It's a lot easier to go more detailed than to try to get more loose when you've already kind of over detailed everything, if that makes sense. So don't be afraid of going too simple. That is a foundation you can build on. Most of us spend all our time trying to loosen up because we're too tight. So hopefully that makes sense. Robin, I'm hoping that's all the questions, but you can throw more up while I switch the camera over if you'd like, and I'll get to them in a few minutes. What I'm going to do now is move over to my work surface. And here on my work surface, you can see I've got one of these wooden panels. And I'm going to just turn my other video camera on because it takes better quality video. And we're going to do some painting on this little wooden panel. Now this wooden panel I've prepped in advance. I'm a core artist educator, and they sent me this watercolor ground, which is on this half of the panel, and it's got a little toothy surface, very much like slightly rougher than hot press watercolor paper, and you can see it shows the brush marks. And then I've got core light dimensional ground, which is on this side, and it's it's different. It's got a different texture. It actually has a different weight if you're holding the two jars in your hands. So they're different. The light dimensional ground I think is going to resist the paint a bit more. And I have to decide what I'm going to do with this. I think I'm going to go this direction, because this could be my land if I'm going this direction for a landscape. This could be my sky. I could go this way, and then this would be my sky, and then I'd have this interesting landscape, which could be a really nice hill with a lot of grasses. I just don't know. I think I'm going this way. And then on YouTube, I have this video on how to paint this topic. This is a landscape that I painted, and I just love the sky in it. It looks just beautiful. And you can watch me demo and demonstrate that painting here on YouTube once we wrap up the video today. So I'm going to paint this scene inspired by that painting. We'll see how it goes. And I feel like there's shadows. Let me just flip one more light on. Okay, so yes, this is not paper, and I'll talk a little bit more about what watercolor ground is. Let me just move my microphone so I'm not quieter. Okay, so watercolor ground is an alternate surface for watercolor. It comes in this tub, and Daniel Smith makes some as well. You can apply it to any surface. So this means you can paint on wood, you can paint on canvas. It gives you an absorbent surface to paint with watercolor. It is not exactly the same as paper, and it will not react exactly the same, at least not in my experience. But it gives you that additional option. And so I wanted to show this to you because many years ago I was working in town and at this photocopy shop, and this artist came in to get some photocopies made, and or photographs done or something of her paintings. And she had these beautiful watercolor paintings, and she had done them on artist canvas. And I looked at that and I talked to her and I said, who told you you could paint watercolor on artist canvas? Are you using a special preparatory medium to get your paint to stick to the canvas? And she said, no, I'm just painting on it. And I said, well, who told you could do that? And she said, oh, nobody. I just decided to do it. And it blew my mind, because at the time I just assumed that no one could ever paint watercolor on canvas. And when I tried it, it didn't work as beautifully for me as it did for her, but she had developed a working method so that she could paint her beautiful, vibrant portraits and animal portraits on canvas. And I love that she did that, and she didn't wait to ask permission or to see some tutorial online. She just went for it. And I'm telling you this because I want to encourage you to be thinking and challenging what you think is possible in watercolor. I want you to do that all the time. You can see right now the paint is sticking to the surface. It's not pooling and beading like it might if you were painting on just a canvas surface. It does kind of hold to the surface a little bit more than it would. And if you've been using if you've been using Yupo to paint your watercolor paintings, you'll be experienced with how the paint moves differently on Yupo as well. And this is a different feel from that. So it's just something to try. But if you don't have it, no worries. Just think about, but do think about what you might have on hand. Maybe you have a canvas that you've used for acrylic painting. Go ahead and give it a try. So I am trying to work on some sky and recognizing that as I paint with transparent watercolor on this watercolor ground, the brush marks and texture that I created are showing. And some of this watercolor ground, I should mention, I applied with a palette knife, and I just rubbed it on, and so some of it went on a lot like icing, and then other parts were put down with a brush, and there's a little bit more of a linen texture. And then just before I put it away to dry, I spritzed it with water, and those little sprinkles of water made some little pock marks in the watercolor ground as well. So I've got all kinds of stuff going on there. So yeah, if you invest in watercolor ground, it actually comes in, Daniel Smith makes it in several colors as well. So you can get it in, you can actually get it in gold, you can get it in, I think, an off-white, and you can get it in black. And I have a tutorial for using black watercolor ground, which is one of my favorite things on YouTube, and it was actually the post that gave me the opportunity to work with Daniel Smith. So right now I'm just thinking sky, and I'm liking seeing those watery bits there. As I paint with lots of water, the lines that I make get a little fuzzy around the edges as they soak into the watercolor ground. And that's the main thing I've noticed with watercolor ground, is that it doesn't give me as many crisp lines as I would get if I were painting. It just doesn't have the line quality that it would were I painting on traditional paper. So we're going to throw some Cascade Green down. And I'm hoping that Cascade Green, because it has that tendency to separate, I'm hoping it will give us some really pretty textures in the cracks and crevices that were created by the palette knife. The thing that I think is really interesting about using these alternate surfaces and using these kind of pasty kind of grounds, as you can see, it's kind of chunky, is that you could totally paint your entire painting as texture before you ever put color on the surface. And I've kind of done that here, because as I painted as I positioned, and you can see it's really doing stuff over here, as I positioned and splattered on that surface, I was thinking about doing two separate portions of the paper. So this lower portion I put on with a lot more texture. It's got a lot more little dips and crevices, and then the upper part is softer. And so I really had kind of the beginning, the textural parts of my painting established before I ever started painting in that white of the watercolor ground. Just think of how much fun it would be to do your value study using watercolor ground and quantities of texture instead of light and dark values. That's just kind of fun to think about. It makes me want to explore it more. A little bit of green gold. And then back to the Cascade Green. There's this beautiful kind of turquoise color that's coming out from the Cascade Green. It's an amazing color. Let's do a little bit of drama up in the sky. I'm going to use that violet because it's just like one of my favorite colors. It is called Schmincke's Manganese Violet. We'll throw some up there for some darks. And counter it down below as well. I also find that when I'm working with this new medium, the watercolor ground, there's a part of me that has low expectations. I don't really know what I'm doing. And low expectations mean that I can take a few more risks because it's probably not going to turn out anyhow. I like the splatters when they originally went down over here, and now as I look at it, I'm thinking it's not as pretty as it was when it first went down. I'm also seeing that the bubbles from when I drag my brush, it makes kind of these foamy little bubbly marks, which actually kind of stick around. They don't disappear. So I'm not sure how that will affect the texture in my painting. Right now I'm just going to do a little bit of puddling with a wet brush, touch in a drop of water, and let it make some watermarks to give me texture up here. And then, like I said, I wasn't super happy with those marks. Let's see if they'll lift out a little bit if I just move my brush and scrub over top of them a little bit. You know, with Yupo, you can wet and re-wet your surface and just get it erased right away back down to the white of the paper, but or near white anyhow. But with this, I'm not sure if it does the same thing, if I am able to lift or if things soak in and stain a bit. Using more water does seem to give me more freedom to show the texture of the surface, which I think is really nice. And you can see the watermarks that are created when I'm just puddling in here with a wet brush. So I'm painting with water right now. As this dries, I might decide to come in with some line. See if we can choose a darker color here. And right now it's still damp enough that any lines I place will soften and bleed away in some places. Hopefully stay crisp in a few others. Now just look at how beautiful those textures are right in this area. Absolutely gorgeous. And in here too, we're really seeing some beautiful paths of texture here. And I think we're going to see even more of that up in the sky once this is dry. So I think that's all I'm going to do on this right now. We'll give it a chance to dry. This was really fun to play with. Every time I work with watercolor ground, I develop new strategies for using it and new ideas for how it can be used. Experience and playfulness have been my favorite teachers. And we're just gonna switch back over to the work surface. Okay. And I hope I didn't confuse you all too much. Pulling out a brand new medium. I just keep wanting to do this because I want to show you how many options and opportunities there are. One thing I have as an instructor is the opportunity to try many, many different products and to show you how they work. Then you get to decide if that's something you want to pull into your repertoire, or maybe you've got some ideas for how you can adapt it to what you have on hand in your own working method. And that's really the most fun. Yeah, lots of, Robin, I'll wait for questions here. Robin was listing my colors. The blue I was using, I believe, was Verditer blue, Robin. Thank you. And yes, this is something that I would need to seal after it was painted. You could just use a spray sealant to just spray over like an acrylic varnish or something like that. Would seal it really well. And then it doesn't have to be framed under glass or with a mat. So that's the fun of that. Will I post it after it's finished? Yeah, I probably won't do much more with it, to tell you the truth. That's probably just going to be a one-layer painting. But that's what there is. And yeah, the blue I used, Robin, was Verditer. Jan says, after our recap, I'm digging out my gesso. Yes, gesso is another great tool to use. It's going to be less... it's going to be more resistant to watercolor, so the color will puddle on it and you'll get a lot of watermarks, but that can be really fun to work with as well. Yes. Okay, Christine says, keep showing us new things. Good. I don't want to bankrupt anyone, but I love showing you the products I'm working with and the fun I'm having with them. Okay, I am out of time. We are going to wrap up, and I just want to thank you for coming along with me today. Encourage you to visit the week 5 lessons. Be really, really open to how you want to use them. This is the part of the course as we're getting into these last 2 weeks where you really need to be most in tune with your inner artist, listening to yourself. Where are your interests? Where does your heart say you need to be working right now? What are you ready to pursue? and what are you needing to let go of in order to pursue it more fully? And that's a big part of it. Do not feel like you need to learn everything all at once. Focus with intention, pause to play, have a balance between those two. And you'll see amazing growth. I'm already seeing amazing growth from all of you. Remember, in week 6, we pull together our collection of everything we've been working on in the last 6 weeks, and we share it. We look at what the cumulative body of work, and we see what we've accomplished. It's a great reinforcement and reminder that growth is always happening as long as you are painting. Thank you. Plan to join us in the community as well, fearlessartist.net, where you can download today's lesson notes and join in, share your work, and join in the community there. So, and my landscape course that's launching June 1st, I'll have more information on that as well. It's been a very busy time, and it's a lot of fun to be coming up with new content to share with you. I just feel like as I learn more, I just love giving what I've learned out to all of you so you can grow as well. Okay, thank you. Utort is asking about where you can buy Angela's works. I do not have a public gallery online right now, but if there's a particular painting you're interested in, feel free to send me an email, info@angelafair.com, or visit my website. And Robin's just told you that, so that's perfect. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the sunny weather. Hopefully you have it. Play, focus. You'll find your way. I believe in you. Okay, finding the off button and saying goodbye. Okay, bye for now.